Hi guys, I'm Jim and this is Jim's Fix-It Shop. Today we're going to go over the snapper model and hit some points on some issues some viewers have had where their machine is just not moving. It's not going up a hill. I can't get it in reverse, but it'll work in second, third, and fourth. Won't work in first and reverse. There's a lot of points on here. If they're worn out, it's not going to work. And you could have a combination of one or two or three different items that are just worn a little, but add them all up and this thing's not going to move. It's very well thought out and engineered, but everything has to work together to make this thing work. So let's shoot the camera over on this model and I'm going to point out some spots that you're going to want to check. Okay, now we're over here at the model. First thing you want to check that a lot of people have problems with is this bushing. If your machine has bushing, some have bearings. You want to check. I've seen them where they're wore into the bushing. I've seen some through the bushing, through this steel flange that holds the bushing, and a ½ inch up into the fender, and it was just starting to give her problems. Another point you want to check. If you're having trouble with it shifting, it really seems like it's shifting hard, take your boots back and grease this shaft. If it's dirty, clean it first and grease it. Shift your case over in fifth and do this half. Shift it in reverse and do this half. Grease it up good. Next point you want to check is check your drive disc. Make sure it's between 3 3/4 and 3 13/16 from the bottom of your deck. Now I have a video that shows you how to make one of these gauges out of a paint stick. That's all this is. Instead of spending 30 bucks on a steel one from Parts Tree or Jack Small Engines or wherever you get your parts from. I made a steel one because I use this thing all the time, and for me a paint stick don't hold up very long. Once you got that set, you want to check your clutch disc. I don't know if I got one laying around here or not. Okay, off camera, I took the 4 nuts off that holds this flange on. Take that flange off. Underneath there you have your little fiber washer. Now this is a soft start clutch. Then you got your clutch disc. Now when you check this, not only do you want to make sure the outside of this is in good shape, this one's wore down quite a bit. And it's got a lot of bumps and nicks in it, and some spots that are missing. If I was having problems with this going, I would change this. But the outside is not all you want to check. You want to check the inside. There's a material in here. I don't know what it is. Kind of reminds me of an asbestos lining on it for a brake. But that rubs on this surface on your clutch disc assembly. Now if you're having problems with it and you're thinking about replacing your clutch disc, you don't necessarily have to buy this whole assembly. These very seldom wear out. I have had some viewers that have had trouble with them, and you want to check. Let me take that nut off. This thing is real sloppy. I mean, it was wiggling. One of them sent me a video of it, and this was wiggling all over. And I told him, I said, you got to take that off and check it. So he took it apart. He took this off. And I dropped a couple washers. And the hole in this was totally ate out. It was so big, there wasn't even a slot for the key anymore. So he had to replace this. But typically, you shouldn't have to. We'll get to washers later. This is important. If this is all wore out in here, buy a new one. But watch it when you buy them. Some viewers have got a hold of me and said, hey, I ordered a new clutch disc and the lining wasn't in the inside of it. Well, they don't know what year machine he had, and they sent him a clutch disc for a solid clutch, and it didn't have that stuff. And sometimes when you get it, that lining will come separate. You got to glue it in there yourself. Couple things to watch for. Putting this together is sometimes a handful. We'll just stick a couple of these back on. Now, I had another viewer get a hold of me and he said, oh man, this thing just isn't shifting good. I can't get it in reverse. What you're going to want to check is the slot in your yoke. That's this down here that your clutch hooks to that allows you to shift. This is an old one that is really shot. It fits in here like this. This was probably second or third gear. Now the bottom of this should be parallel with the top surface. Nothing rubs on the top, so that never wears out. So that'll give you a good idea how bad this really is in this area, this corner, and over here for reverse. And that's why this one never stayed in reverse. Reverse is about here, and there's no corner left here anymore. It should be sharp corner like the top, and it just kept sliding off. That's another problem that'll give you issues on trying to travel across your yard, is this big divot right here. That allows the clutch disc and chain case to pull away from the drive disc. Another problem you're going to want to look for is these little plastic bushings that lets the yoke pivot when you step on your clutch. Now this one doesn't look too bad. It's got the entire diameter on the back side. That's what rubs on the case. This one, you can see that big hole right there where that's wore away? That was allowing the yoke to pull away because of the spring pressure on the chain case, and that wouldn't allow it to swing up against the drive disc and propel the machine across the yard. So these are other points that can be bad. Another thing you want to check, the first thing you want to do if you're having problems with it is tighten the yoke spring. I got a yoke spring right here. Now on this model, you have 2 holes in the bottom, you have 3 in the top. Typically, they'll put it in the top hole on the bottom, and they'll put it in the first or second hole on the top. That's the weakest setting. You want to tighten this thing up so it drives good. You want to put it in the bottom hole in the bottom side, the top hole on the top side. That gives you the tightest spring tension. That alone solves a lot of people's problems with it not going across the yard. So that's the points you want to check. Your bushing on this side of your machine. If you've got a yard like my father-in-law's, it's on the large size, and he mows twice a week. If I was running this machine that much, I would grease this once a month. Put a shot of grease into this bushing. That is the only way. That one's shot. That's the only way this side gets any lubricant at all. This side gets lubricated from the oil in your differential. The older machines, they put this snapper lube in them. That stuff dries up and it doesn't get splashed around in there as much anymore. And this side doesn't get lubricated as much as it should get. Okay, I've got some samples. This is a wonderful snapper lube that they use. If you can see inside this bottle, this is out of my boss's 5-year-old machine. And you can see how thick this stuff is. Well, what this stuff does is every once in a while, I'll run it up on the side like this and let it go back down. And what this is doing inside of your cases, it's getting splashed around in there. It doesn't run back down like it should, and then it dries on the case. And from over time of keeping doing that, pretty soon this liquid is just distributed all over inside these cases, and it's all dried up. It's probably a good lubricant when it's new, but when it starts to get old, it's just too thick as far as I'm concerned. I don't use that in my machine, but I wouldn't try to talk you into using it in yours. You have to decide that on your own. Now this, about 8 months ago, I had to have a new bearing and axle put in my Blazer. My Blazer was 16 years old, and this is the 8090 gear lube that came out of it. I told him I want him to save me it. And you can see after 16 years, this stuff is still as free flowing as it was when it was brand new. It doesn't coat the sides and stick there. If you let this set, this will all run down and become clear plastic just like it was before I shook it. But I like using this, but you do have some issues once in a while using it. Here, pick this camera up so I can see you. You do have some issues using 8090 gear lube. And I've tried to tell guys, I've got a case over here, just a second. Don't you just love pause? Now, you can have some issues if you use 8090 gear lube. Your differential cover has a hole for some reason. They stamped these in here. You can see that dent on the inside. Some of these covers, if you hold it up to the light and look, you can see light through that hole. I heard once that they punch them in there and they use them as a drain as they're going through the wash cycle and coming down to be painted. Whether that's true or not, I don't really know. But I was told when they assemble these things, they're supposed to hammer that shut, which is not going to guarantee you it don't leak. So when I rebuild one of these, I weld that shut, grind it off, and I know it's not going to leak. That's your differential cover. Your chain case is the same way. The one side, if you look real close, they call that a bird mouth. And again, they're supposed to hammer that shut. And even when they do that, 80-90 gear lube is going to leak out of that. So I weld them shut. Another issue you're going to have is the fit on these bearings with that shaft. The newer machines, they put O-rings on the shaft to seal that because they knew they were having a problem with this snapper lube leaking out of there. I have a product that I'll send to you at cost. I'm not trying to make money off anybody. That you put some on the inside of these bearings and on the shaft when you assemble it. It's a product that I use at work. It's made by Loctite. It's called retaining compound, and it will actually glue them together, if you want to call it that, and they won't leak after that if you get enough on there. But if you're experiencing any problems with this thing not moving across the yard like you know it's supposed to, check them points, because if you've got some that are just wore out a little, all of them will add up to a big issue. If you grab onto, I don't know if I can tip this down now, if you grab onto my yoke, you can wiggle that up and down quite a bit. And that's because these plastic bushings are wore out. They're less than $2 a piece, I believe, is what one of the viewers told me he paid for his. But check them points out if you're having problems, and if you need any more help, send me an email or put something down in that little description box. Normally, I get notified. I have had a couple of guys that got a hold of me. Well, one in particular, he said, I put a comment down in your box, and he says, it's been like 6 months and you haven't got back with me. Do it again. I answer these things. I try to answer them every night, but I'm getting, like, at this point, about 75, 80 emails a day, and I try to get to them all daily. But sometimes it'll be 2 days, maybe 3 before I get them all answered. Just depends how busy I am at night. Usually when I quit, I go in the house, we eat, we sit down, we turn on television, and I'm answering emails. But that's why I do this, is to help you guys out. So don't feel bad by sending me an email. I've had a lot of guys put comments in there, I really hate to bother you. It's not a bother. If you were bothering me, I'm really busy, I won't answer them. But up to this point, I'm still answering them, so don't worry about it. Check out these things. If you have any issues that you can't figure out, let me know, and I'll get back with you on it. This was just a little more complicated to try and answer in an email to, I believe it was Rick. I'm not sure. I get so many on a name. I told him I was going to do a video, and just look for it. So until next time, work safe, have fun, and we'll talk to you soon.